We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Chesamid Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 18b. The Gemara is in the middle of discussing the pasuk which says, Le'am nochri lo yimshol lemachra, he shouldn't sell her, talking about the Yama Hevriya, he shouldn't sell her to a foreign nation, bevigdo ba, because he acted with her deceitfully. And the Gemara is about to bring a machlokas tanoim in terms of how to learn the pasuk, and it's going to be relevant to the shita of Rabbi Shimon that we mentioned on the previous Amud. And the Gemara now continues, according to Rabbi Akiva, how do we understand the pasuk of bevigdo ba? Kevan sheperes taliso aleh, once he spreads his talis over her, shuvein rashoy lemochra, he's no longer allowed to sell her as a shivcha. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, that's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rashi will explain. Rabbi Eliezer says, bevigdo ba, what does it mean bevigdo ba? Kevan shebagad ba, once he acts with her deceitfully, shuvein rashoy lemochra, he's not allowed to sell her anymore as a shivcha. B'ma'ika miflagi, and what are they arguing about? Rabbi Eliezer savar yesh aim lemesoris. Rabbi Eliezer says it follows the way, the word follows the way it's written. For Rabbi Akiva savar yesh aim lemikra, and Rabbi Akiva says we follow the way that the word is read. Again, all of this will be explained by Rashi. For Rabbi Shimon savar yesh aim lemikra v'la mesoris, and Rabbi Shimon mentioned on the previous summit, he holds that we follow both the way it is read and the way it is written. And Rashi explains, Kevan sheperas taliso aleha, the alkarchach mi boile luukme yeshem lemikra krebi Akiva kedamrin b'sanhedrin b'parakama v'yeshem lemesoris krebi Eliezer. First Rashi says, we have to say that Rabbi Akiva holds yeshem lemikra, we have to say Rabbi Eliezer says yeshem lemesoris, that's already in Sanhedrin and kedadakinan b'bechoros and in bechoros, teraminan meha pluksal milsa achrisi, because we're going to use this machlokas for other matters. Teraminan hasam Rabbi Eliezer yeshem lemikra, v'raminan Allah meha di yeshem lemesoris, svir and we have certain contradictions we have, and within the Tanoim, what they hold in terms of Yeshem Lemikra, Yeshem Lemesores. Uv Mechilta Garsinan, in the Mechilta it says, Sheperes Taliso Allah B'divrei Rabbi Akiva, it says Peres Taliso Allah in the words of Rabbi Akiva, that's what we have over here, with Rabbi Eliezer less Hasam, and then it doesn't have Rabbi Eliezer there at all. And Rashi continues, Liam Nachri, again it said you can't sell her to a foreign nation, Da'ainu L'Shivcha. So the first thing Rashi tells us is it doesn't really mean a foreign nation, it doesn't mean selling her to a non-Jew, it's referring to selling her as a shivcha. And the pasuk means, according to Rabbi Akiva, lo yimshol ha'av me'achar sheperes taliso adon aleh l'shem yud. Let's say at a situation where the adon already married her, he did yud, he designated her as his wife. Im girsha beget, if he then went ahead and divorced her with a get, so she was already married to the adon and then divorced. The chazrei tzalavi, and she returned to her father's house. That's what the pasuk is referring to. In that case, it's coming from the word beged, kevan sheperes taliso aleha bevigdo ba. The talis is like a beged. In that situation where she's already been married, so then the father can't sell her as a shifcha. Avolo yiyada, but let's say there was no yiyud. The chazrei tzalav, and then she returned to the father's house. Chozru mochra, according to Rabbi Akiva, then he is allowed to go and sell her again. Kirabbanan, that all follows the sheet of the Rabbanan. The Amri La'el, they said earlier, l'shivchas achar ishas hudelo, that shivchas after ishas is not allowed. Kihacha, like this case over here, the mechiyiyah do havalei liishas, because yiyud is like ishas. Haval shivchas achar shivchas matzi mazvin. But according to Rabbi Akiva, again following the Rabbanan earlier, shivchas achar shivchas is fine. That's Rabbi Akiva's understanding. Peres taliso allowed. The word bevigdo, when it says bevigdo ba, that is a reference to the beged, and that follows Rabbi Akiva, who says yeshem lemikra. The way we read the pasuk, you read it as beged. Rabbi Eliezer says kevon shebagad ba shemachar l'shivchas. He understands the pasuk completely different. When it says bevigdo ba, means when he acted deceitfully with her, meaning if he sold her as a shivcha, shoveno yachol lemochar lam nachra, he can't sell her again to a foreign nation. Dahainu shivchas, he can't sell her a second time, meaning as a shivcha. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the pasuk really just means you can't sell to shivchas after shivchas. Aval shivchas achar ishas, but according to Rabbi Eliezer, to sell her as a shivcha after she's been a wife, achar ishas kiddushin matzi mazvin, then that's okay. Shivchas achar ishas is not a problem. Rabbi Shimon, now what does Rabbi Shimon hold? Dorish l'hak Rabbi Eliezer, he darshans like Rabbi Eliezer, kevan shabagad bashuv lo yimcharena, that once he acted deceitfully with her, he can't sell her, meaning you can't have shivchas after shivchas. V'darish le'nami Rabbi Akiva, and he also darshans like Rabbi Akiva, to kevan sheperes taliso aleh lo yimcharena, that once he spread his talis over her, if there was yud, he can't sell her as a shivcha. L'hachi kamar lo l'shivchas achar ishas, v'lo l'shivchas achar shivchas. Again, Rabbi Shimon saying both. You can't do shivchas achar ishas, and you cannot do shivchas achar shivchas. And Rashi continues to explain lemesores. What does it mean mesores the way it's written? Bevigdo ksiv v'lo bevigdo. It says it without a yud. It actually is like bogad, like to rebel. Ein havoras chiruk below yud. If you're just going by the way it's written, so without the yud, you don't make it like a chiruk. You don't read it as bevigdo. When akuda shetachas habeis b'malkam yud, there's an akuda under the beis that's like a yud, but we we don't count the nekuda. Mishtam meshes avalafi mashenechtav hayalo likros chatav kamatz bevogdo. The way it's written, you would actually read it as like an act of rebellion, deceitfulness. Lashon begida kemosha takori b'shamos divrei ha'ala. So that's what it means. Yeshem lemisores. And the other way, like Rabbi Akiva, Yeshem lemikra, you follow the way it's read. Bevigdo karinan kemovat tispeseu bevigdo. We read it as bevigdo, and it's like a beged. Again, it's a reference to the talis. It's a reference to yiyah, to the marriage. Yeshem lemikra v'la masoris. And then we say, according to Rabbi Shimon, we follow both of the reading and the way it's written. Hilkach darish tarvayu. Therefore, we darshan both of them according to Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Boy Rabba bar Ravua. Rabba bar Ravua asks the following question. Yiyud nisuin osa or erisin osa is yiyud. Does that create nisuin? Does that create marriage? Or does that create erisin? Does that just create betrothal? And that's talking again about a situation. Let's say the adon has yiyud with the amo evriya. He designates her to marry her. Is that considered to be a nisuin, or is that an erisin? And the Gemara says, Nafkamina, the difference is, Liyorsha v'litamelo l'hafar nedorea. The difference is in terms of inheriting her, in terms of being metame to her. Let's say he's a Kohen. In terms of annulling her vows, he himself is able to annul her vows. All of those things are only true by nisuin. They're not true by erisin. So that's the question of Rabba bar Ravua. Is yir considered to be a nisuin or an erisin? The Gemara says, Mai. So what is yir considered to be? Tashma, the Gemara says, come and hear the following proof. We said above, according to Rabbi Akiva, bevigdo ba. Again, what does the pasuk of bevigdo ba mean? Kevan sheperes taliso eleh shuvein orashoy lemochra. Once he spreads his talis over, he's no longer allowed to sell her. Again, that was talking about a situation of once this young girl is married, once she has ishus, so the father is no longer able to sell her as a shivcha. And so the Gemara infers, he's not able to sell her as a shivcha. But apparently he is able to designate her as a wife. He is allowed to give her away as a wife. Now, if you're going to say that yiyud is considered to be nisuin, so keva denis is shuv ainly of yirishas, but the halach is once a girl gets married, her father no longer has rishas over her. He can't give her away as a wife, and so therefore it seems clear that yiyud is only considered to be an erisin. Elalav shmamina erisin osa. Don't we see from here that it's erisin, that yiyud is considered to be an erisin and not a nisuin? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Hacha b'kiddushin di'alma koy. Over here we might be talking about just regular kiddushin. Meaning to say, Rabbi Akiva, we interpreted Rabbi Akiva before to mean, what does it mean that the young girl has ishus? It means that she was sold as an amo evriya, and then the adon took her, he designated her as a wife, there was yud. That's what we understood it to mean. Once you have this yud, so then he can no longer sell her as a shivcha. But who says that's what it means? Maybe it just means she had a regular kiddushin. Her father gave her away as in kiddushin, and that was the ishus. And the point is, he can't sell her as a shivcha after kiddushin. V'achi kamar, according to that, this is all we're saying. Kevan shemisara avia l'mishan eschayev b'she'era ksusa v'yonasa. Once her father gives her away to someone who's now chayev to take care of her in terms of sher ksus v'yonah, in terms of supporting her with food and clothing and with marital relations. So at that point in time, shuvein yachol l'mochra. He's no longer able to sell her as a shivcha, and he's no longer able to sell her rather as an amo evriya. And so the point is exactly this idea that Kevan Shaperis Taliso Aleh has nothing to do with Yud. And it would not answer our question of whether Yud is Nisuin or Erisin, because it's just talking about a normal standard Kiddushin, a normal standard Erisin, and saying she can't be sold as a Shivcha, she can't be sold as an Amo Evriya after that regular Kiddushin. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come and hear the following proof. Ein mocher lekrovim, when a girl is sold to be an amo evriya, he can't sell her, the father can't sell her to relatives. That, of course, would be a problem, because there's a concept of yiyud, and you can't have yiyud, you can't have the adon designate her as a wife if he's related to her. Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Amru, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, they said, mocher lekrovim, he is able to sell her to relatives. Vishavin, but they agree, shemocher almana lekohen gadol, that she can be sold, let's say she's an almana, she can be sold as a shifcha to a kohen gadol, even though a kohen gadol can't marry an almana. Grusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyor, if she's a grusha, if she's a chalutza, she can be sold to a kohen hedyot, even though kohen hedyot can't marry a grusha v'chalutza. That everybody agrees is allowed. And so the Gemara now analyzes this brisa. Hay almona hechidami. When we talk about taking a young girl who's an almona and selling her as a shivcha, what exactly is the case? Ilema de kodesh nafshif. The case over here is that she accepted the kiddushin herself. It wasn't her father that did the kiddushin, so that's not even really a kiddushin. Almona karila, are we going to call her an almona? That's not a kiddushin on a doraisa level. Viela de kidshavia, rather, what do you have to say? What does it mean she's an almona? It means she's an almona from a kiddushin that her father gave her away in marriage. But in that situation, mimotzi mazvin, but if there was already a kiddushin from her father, is he able to sell her as a shifcha? Didn't we already say, v'ain adam mocher bitul l'shifcha sachar ishus? We said that a person is not allowed to sell his daughter as a shifcha after ishus, so this would seem to indicate the opposite. V'yomer Rav Amram Amar Rav Yitzchak, so Rav Amram said that Rav Yitzchak says, the way to explain this is, hacha b'kiddusha yiyud ve'alibad Rav Yossi b'Rav Yehuda. Here what we're talking is, she did have a kiddushin, but it was a kiddushin of yiyud, meaning to say she was sold as a shifcha, and then the adon, he designated her to be a wife, and we're following the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar, who says, Mos harishonos lav lekidushin nitnu, that the original money that's given, meaning that original money when he sells her as an amo hevriya, that's not designated specifically for kiddushin. But the Gemara now asks, if over here in this brisa we're talking about yiyud, v'yamr nisuin os, if you're going to say that yiyud is considered to be a nisuin, so how is the father involved at all? Kevan shenisis, once she's married, it's considered a nisuin, shuv ein li of yirashusba, the father, her father would have absolutely no control, no rishus over her, and so therefore it seems to be, that yiyud is not nisuin, rather it's erisin. But the Gemara continues, V'yelamai, but what else are you going to say? Erisin osa? Are you going to say it's just considered to be an erisin? V'shavin shamochra, but it says that everybody agrees that he can sell her an almona l'koin gadol, grusha v'chalutza l'koin hedyot. Ha'ein adam mocher espito l'shifcha sacharishas. That doesn't make sense either. If there was yid over here and it's erisin, it's still a problem, because a person is not allowed to sell his daughter as a shifcha after ishas. Rather, what do you have to say? Shani erisin dida me erisin diavia. You have to say that her erisin is different than the erisin that comes from her father. And if you're going to say that, afilotema nisuin, so then we can even say that the yid is considered nisuin, and shani nisuin dida me nisuin diavia. We'll just say that her nisuin is different than the nisuin from her father. And Rashi explains, according to the Tanakama, Ein mochra ha'av lebito lekrovim. Again, according to the Tanakama, the father can't sell his daughter to relatives. She asura aleim liyad, because there you can't do yid. She can't marry the relatives. To boinan asher lo yada, because again, you need to have that possibility. Mochra lekrovim, but according to Rabbi Eliezer, he could sell her to relatives. V'lo boinan yid, there's no need to be able to do yid. If you have a situation where you could do yid, you do yid, but it's not a requirement in terms of selling her as an amo ivriya. V'shavin shemochra, but they both agree that she can be sold kishi almona when she's an almona l'kohen gadol to a kohen gadol. The kiddushin tofsin loba, there the kiddushin is chal, meaning even though it's a prohibited relationship, but there is kiddushin between almona l'kohen gadol. Let's say they violate and they do have a kiddushin, that kiddushin is chal. The kiddushin tofsin b'chai ve'lavin, when you just have chai ve'lavin, it's just a negative commandment. The kiddushin is still tofes. And so the Gemara then said, Ida Kaddish Nafsha, now we're calling her an almona. What's the case? If the case is she accepted a Kiddushin Shalo al Yedei Aviyah, not through her father, and then the husband died, and that's how she's a widow, almona karila, we're going to call that an almona bitmiya? That doesn't make sense. V'chiyesh b'maisa katana klum, she's just a minor. That's not going to mean anything on a doraisa level. V'yomer Rav Amram Garsin, and so Rav Amram said, the case over here is where she's an almona, hacha shenesar mulam mikidusha yiyud. The case over here is she was sold as an amo hevriya, and then there was yiyud, and then she became a widow from that kiddusha yiyud. V'hai the hadar matzi lezavuna v'lo kari le l'shifchas acharishas. And so why is it over here that it seems to be talking about the fact that there was yiyud? So essentially, you have a situation of ishus, and this should be a problem of shifchas acharishas. Why is that not a problem? Why are we talking about in this brisa that the father can sell her as a shifcha? Alibad Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. It's because this brisa is following the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Lakamon, he says later on, Mos harishonos shel miknasa, that first money that you get when you sell her as an amo ivriya, lav lekiddushin nitnu, that isn't given for kiddushin purposes. V'chi miyayed lo ba'avdos sheyesh lo eleh miyayed lo, and when you do yid over there, it's really an exchange for the avdos. She's supposed to be an evet, she's supposed to be an amo ivriya, she's supposed to be an evetim. Vein kiddushin elu al yedei ha'av, meaning to say this kiddushin actually is not really through the father, it's coming directly from the master to the amo ivriya. Ugzeres hakasav hi sheyu kiddushin. That's just a gzeres hakasav that it's considered a kiddushin. Hilka chader matzi lezavuna. That kind of kiddushin essentially we're saying is different, and therefore he's able to sell her as a shifcha after that kind of a kiddushin. That's what we're referring to over here. But the Gemara then said, Ha'ein adam mocher v'chulu, but it doesn't make a difference. If you just like you're going to say that if it's a nisuin, so then the father has no rishus to sell her. But again, we're back to our original question. After Erisin also he can't sell her as a shifcha, as an amo ivriya. V'afilu achar Erisin, even after Erisin, that's a problem. But you're going to say what? That shani Erisin dida, this kind of Erisin is different because it's her Erisin. It's an Erisin through yud. Tekevan dehulo kitcha yachol amocher, since the father wasn't the one that did the kiddushin, but rather we're saying again, like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, understood that it's really the Mos or Rishonos are not the Kiddushin. It's really the Avdus that creates the Kiddushin. It's her that's creating the Kiddushin. So you're going to say it's different. But once you're saying already that Eris and Dida is different and he can sell her as a Shifcha after Eris and Dida, so you might as well say the same thing after the Nisuin Dida. Say that Nisuin is also different if it's Nisuin Dida. It's different than his Nisuin if it's coming from her. And therefore we really don't have a proof that Yud is Eris and not Nisuin, because it might be Nisuin as well. But the Gemara now continues, Hi Mai, what kind of comparison are you making? Just because you can say Eris and Dida is different than Eris from her father, you can't necessarily say that by Nisuin, and so therefore we really do have a proof that Yud is just Erisin. Bishlama Erisin me Erisin Shani. I understand that one kind of Erisin can be different than another. Elin Nisuin min Nisuin, but when you're talking about one Nisuin from another, is that really possible? And Rashi explains, Bishlama Erisin me Erisin Shani, the equal av kopit kroy. You could say that we're makvan on the father. The lol is zavna basar the kitcha. He shouldn't sell her after he already gave her away to Kiddushin. V'kevan dahani Kiddushin lav iuavin, and since he didn't do this Kiddushin, this kind of Erisin by Yid's really coming from her, not from him, so nitan lo rishus lamochra. We can make this distinction and say that he does have the rishus to sell her. Masha'in ken, we can't say that el nisuin. Masha'in ken, we can't say that by nisuin. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yotes Amud Aleph.